our conversation Friday, I realized how much bread means to individuals, and that we need to be comfortable with our bread and not feel guilty or confused or sad. We need to be able to eat good food, enjoy it, and have a good conscience, right? And be healthy. So I
Yes,
said,
yes.
let's talk about bread. Let's take a deep dive into
Awesome.
bread and
That's my
really
topic.
understand. And it's not just you, it's so many people. That's why I love that we can dialogue together, because it brings to light what many people are struggling with. And folks want to know, what's the best bread? Can I eat bread? Just like you asked last week. So,
And
bread.
my wife was even asking what was the recipe so she could bake me some because I love bread soup.
Oh, recipes. Yes. No, there are wonderful recipes out there for sure. Bread, as you said last time, has been considered the staff of life since the very beginning almost. But sometimes it can be the stuff of lies. Sometimes you go into the grocery store and what's being sold as bread is not really the bread that's the staff of life that will make you healthy. So, bread can be a part of a healthy diet, but it has to have the right ingredients. As we said last
Hmm.
time, bread comes from flour, and flour comes from grains, and grains are natural seeds from plants. Grains are eaten by most of the world. All over the world, the majority of the human population subsists on grains as the basis of their food. In Africa, it's millet. I don't know if you've ever tried millet, but it's a very nice
Hmm.
grain, and it's one that you can integrate into in your diet. Wheat is the staff of their grain, the basis of their grain in Mediterranean Europe. Barley is very, very popular in the Middle East. Rice in Asia, corn in the Americas, like Latin America, South America, corn is their staple, and rye in Northern Europe. So grains play a vital role in our existence, and they give us energy because they are carbs. Now let's look
Hmm.
closer at the anatomy of a grain so we can understand it better. Now, this is an example of a typical grain. On the outside, it's made up of three different parts. On the outside is the bran, and the bran protects the grain, and there you have most of the fiber, B vitamins, and trace minerals. And on the inside, you have the endosperm, which is where you have most of the starch, the carbohydrate. It also has protein and some B vitamins. So the endosperm provides the energy part that we want from our carbs. Remember, carbs provide the fuel for energy. And right here, the little part of the grain is the germ, Germ, the germ. And this provides most of the nourishment for the seed. That's where it stores its fat. That's where it has more B vitamins, vitamin E, trace minerals, and phytonutrients. Now, when the the grain is processed, what we're left with is the endosperm, the white part. And the bran and the germ are usually taken and given to animals for feed. So we're left with just the starch and the vitamins, the protein, all that good stuff has been taken away when it's refined and processed. Now, grindstones are what were used to turn grain to flour. And even in the time of Moses, with the Israelites, every family
Hmm.
had to have their own grindstone. And it was so essential that in Moses's laws, the grindstone was not allowed to be used as a surety for debt. So if you owed somebody money, you couldn't use the grindstone as any kind of levering agent because it was so essential. Like you had to have your grindstone to make your flour, to make your bread, because bread was essential for a healthy life. By the 1870s, though, the grindstone was replaced by the steel roller, where the grain was no longer ground up and you're left with the entire, all the parts of the grain, but now it was crushed. So you could easily remove the three parts. And so big refiners could separate out the endosperm and use that for white flour, which was really sought after by the average person because white flour was what the rich people had. And so if you wanted to kind of have a higher status, you wanted to have more white flour, not this dark, ground up flour that seemed to be for the poor people, even though it had the most nutrients, but they preferred the thinner, whiter flour. So now manufacturers could provide that in quantity by separating the parts of the grain. So this had picked up steam and people were enjoying their white flour. But after the next 100 years, it was realized that there were nutritional deficiencies that were taking place because now folks were having all these refined flour, and they were lacking in vitamin B and vitamin E and zinc and all these things that you had in the whole grain at first. So around World War II, the US government mandated that flour had to be enriched. What does that mean? They had to now add back some of these vitamins that they had taken out with the refining process. So when flour is enriched, it means that this refined flour, this endosperm, they've now sprinkled on some vitamin B and iron. And that's about it. So it's enriched. It has more added vitamins that the grain originally had, but that was taken away. And keep in mind, not all the vitamins have been added back. About 24 nutrients have been removed from the grain when it's refined,
Mm.
when it's milled, when it's crushed, but they only add back about 4 or 5. So a lot of the nutrients have been removed in your refined flours. So I wanted us to take a look at the label of two different types of bread. So we get an idea of what's in the bread and what we need to look for and what we should avoid and what we should try to get. So this is the label of Wonder Classic White Bread. And if you look here, the first thing is unbleached, enriched flour, wheat flour. Now, this does not mean it's whole wheat. When you just have wheat flour, when the WHOLE word is gone, it's just white flour. So you want to get you want to get bread that says whole wheat flour, the whole grain. The next thing you see here is malted barley flour, niacin, because they've sprinkled back some B vitamins on there, iron, which they've sprinkled back on, thiamine, some more B vitamins here they've sprinkled on to enrich it, water, high fructose corn syrup, which is not or friend, right? We don't want to eat
Mhm.
foods with high fructose corn syrup. Then you see yeast. There's some soybean oil that's used, dough conditioners with terms and names that you can't even pronounce well, um, some distilled monoglycerides, calcium peroxide, calcium iodate, some mono and diglycerides, ascorbic acid, vinegar, yeast extract, modified cornstarch. They added some more sugar to it, soy lecithin. They added some vitamin D for enrichment, calcium propionate to retard spoilage. Whew, this kind of bread is a kind of bread you want to avoid. This is not a bread that's the staff of life. It has a grain that has had too many of its nutrients removed, and it's had too many things added. Calcium propionate to prevent it from spoiling. That is not a substance that you want to have as part of your nutritional diet. So when you look at your bread, if the ingredients list is this long with all these things, you want to run. You want to put it away. You want to give it to the birds, and the birds may or may not
Mhm.
eat it. Now let's look at this one, the Ezekiel 4:9 bread. Look at the ingredients here. First one, organic sprouted wheat. Sprouted grains have more nourishment. In a typical grain, you don't have vitamin A or vitamin C. But when it's sprouted, the sprouted grain has those vitamins. So now you not only have vitamin B, but now you have A and C. They have filtered water, sprouted barley, sprouted millet, organic malted barley, organic sprouted lentils, sprouted soybeans, sprouted spelt, organic wheat gluten, and sea salt. Where's the other stuff the other bread had? It's not there, right? All this other conditioners and glutens and high fructose corn syrup and sugar, that is not there. And when you look at the fiber content of this bread, one slice may have about 3 or 4 grams of fiber, where one slice of your Wonder white bread maybe might have 1 gram of fiber. So the fiber content is also very, very different. So when you pick your bread for energy and nutrients, you want a bread like this that has much less additives, much less ingredients, and more whole grains in there. All right. So people often think, well, isn't bread fattening? Won't I get fat if I eat bread? Well, actually, when you look at it closely, if you have a really good whole wheat type bread, one slice is about 70 calories, which is about how many calories you'd find in a mango or maybe 1.5 oranges. And so one slice of bread is not terribly fattening. It actually, if it's a healthy bread, it gives you energy from a good fiber source. It gives you nutrients, like we saw, because it has vitamins and protein. Um, and so it can be a good carb to keep you going. But it's the stuff that we add to the bread. That's the costly overhead, what you put on the bread, that makes it not so healthy anymore. So when we lather butter on our bread, that really packs on the calories. Butter is not the best topping for a nice, healthy, whole grain bread. When we put jam that's had all uh, um, sorts of sugars added to the jam, that's not the best topping for our bread. Meats, deli meats, mayonnaise, all these things make the poor slice of bread, which was meant to be for our good, no longer as healthy. So we have to be careful of the overhead costs. What are we putting on our bread that's really packing on the pounds? What about better toppings? Pastor, I heard last time you said that you put avocado, mashed avocado on your bread.
Yeah, that's our favorite. We
Mm-hmm.
eat a lot of that in our house.
Yes, yes. And mashed avocado is actually a very nice topping. It's fat, it's healthy fat, and it has other minerals and vitamins in there. So it's a very what we call nutrient dense type of food. It's filled with nutritional value. We could also add fruit to our bread. If you want to slice up a banana and put on the bread, that makes a nice topping. You could mash the banana, and that would be excellent. Legumes are
Mhm.
excellent to add to bread, like stewed lentils, um,
Mm.
some cooked beans. Those are very good. And the thing with when you add legumes and fruits to your bread, it increases it and makes it a complete protein. So remember, we said that whole grains have protein. You can find protein in all over the plant kingdom. So whole grains have protein, but whole grains are lacking in one amino acid called lysine, which is an essential amino acid.
Mhm.
So because it lacks that, it's an incomplete protein. But when you add legumes to bread, legumes have lysine. Now you have legumes and bread, you have a
Mhm.
complete protein. And whereas adults can do fine with just the protein from bread and fruit and they're good, children need more protein. So when you give kids a very healthy whole grain bread, add some legumes to it, add some nuts, and that will help to make it a complete protein for your children to enjoy. Hummus is one that does very well in my family. My kids love hummus, and I buy it and I make it. And so hummus comes from chickpeas or garbanzo beans, and that's an
Mhm.
excellent protein. And they love to put that on the bread. It spreads like butter, but it doesn't have all the fat that butter has. And so hummus is an excellent topping, especially when you make it yourself. You can get all different types of flavors to put on the bread. Also, olive, if you want a more oily texture, olive oil, just plain olive oil will be good to put on your bread, and sprinkle with some garlic, and then toast that. And you have awesome garlic bread. So it's important to look at what we're putting on our breads, as also as to what kind of breads we're picking, to make the best choice and to make sure that bread is still the staff of life and not the stuff of lies.
So I'm just curious, Doc. It seems like you could put a little olive oil on the bread. Isn't that the same as putting some butter on the bread? What's the difference between the olive oil and the butter,
Yes,
since
very
it's
good
both?
question.
Mhm.
Very good question, because many individuals are thinking the same thing. Okay, so olive, okay, olives are a natural fruit. They grow naturally from a tree. Now, when you press your olives, you get oil, olive oil. So it's processed, but if it's pressed and without too much heat and additives, you have a mildly or somewhat mildly processed oil. So it's you still get the nutritive benefits of the olives. When you go to butter, now butter is a whole different beast. Butter is composed of oils, but also it has been processed in such a way that it can have a nice firm consistency in cold or even outside of the refrigerator. And so it's made up of a lot of trans fat. The fat in butter has been altered so that the molecule is now a trans or a different structure, so it's more firm, whereas olive oil is more liquid, and that has not had the same processing. It doesn't have the trans fats that butter has. So it's a different processing technique. And also,
Mhm.
butter comes from the fat of animals. So you not only have the difference in the processing to make it a trans fat so it can be more hard in texture and rub smoothly. Now you have to deal with the saturated fat from the animal, which causes more plaque in the body. And the animal itself is often very unhealthy when you're getting the fat from those animals, the milk from the animals to churn and make the butter. So different
Mhm.
processing and different source.
So I
And
have one other question here, Doc,
yes.
if I may.
Mhm.
So now you were talking about the processing of butter, and I
Yes.
noticed, for example, is there a difference with using olive oil cold? I noticed you said cold pressed olive
Yes.
oil. And so, for example, using olive oil, the cold pressed olive oil for frying in opposition to, say, coconut oil, is there a difference? I noticed they have a different texture.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
sure, sure. So when it comes to applying heat to your oils, you want an oil that can stand the heat and not become terribly denatured and altered. Coconut oil and palm oil can tolerate heat much better than your typical oils, your canola oil, your vegetable oil. Olive oil can also stand some heat. So if you choose to fry something, the best choice is coconut oil, but olive oil can withstand strong heats. Ideally, you don't want to be frying much. If you can bake, that's always better than frying. But if you want to, say, fry something one day, you want to use oils that will not be too damaged with high heat, and coconut or olive can take that high heat when you're trying to fry something.
so if I toast my bread, the heat is not high enough to destroy the olive oil. Is that what I'm
No,
hearing?
that's not the same. Yeah, no, very, very, very good question. When you're frying and applying heat for long periods of time, that's very different than when you toast in the toaster oven for 2 minutes tops. Very different. So no, you're not gonna be denaturing your olive oil. That's a good question. Yeah, you won't be denaturing. You won't be developing free radicals or toxins from the oil when you toast it in the toaster oven. No.
So I know this is a general question, but in your estimation,
Mhm.
guess, an average person, healthy, growing, how often do you think it's okay for them to eat bread? Every day, like I do, two slices, or
Yeah,
try to
sure.
get some license from my wife.
Yeah, sure.
So when I get
Sure.
on, still get some 15-grain bread. She don't say you can't eat any because
Yes. So if you are very careful about picking a whole grain bread, you're reading your label and making sure there's not many additives so that the bread you're getting is supplying energy, vitamins, nutrition. And so you've picked a nice whole grain, whole wheat type bread. And then you want to have two slices with a meal. That's fine. That's totally fine because it's giving you a carbohydrate that is energy, producing energy, and it's not highly refined because you're picking the best possible bread. If you're using white bread and the really soft, stretchy, elastic type bread, ooh, that's not the bread for you. Really, you want to wean off of that and move to your really heavier, denser breads. Some people love that nice, soft, melt in your mouth bread, but that's not the one. That's the stuff of life. That's more the stuff of lies. And that's the one you want to get out of your home.
yes. But I'm just curious, Doc. Now, if you're spicing up your meal with taking vitamins anyhow, you're putting some flax seed and some chia seed and all that stuff to get the roughage in.
Hmm.
Why is it not okay then to just eat some of that bad bread? Not,
That bad bread. Okay, so very good question again. Now, I'm going to keep saying this. Our body is a very well designed machine, and we want to put the best nutrients in it to get the best results.